What's up, OUXers? Today I have a conversation with Ghyslain Olier. I hope I got that French pronunciation right. I think I did pretty good there. And Ghyslain is a design director at Content Square, bringing OUX to his team in really, really interesting ways. So I am very thrilled to bring this conversation to you. We talk about metaphor. We talk a lot about metaphor, really get into it with metaphor. And then we also, the thing I really want to highlight is that we talk about how at Content Square, they are OUXing their org chart. They're actually organizing their team around objects, which is very exciting. It's something that I've been dreaming about for a long time. And some teams that are using OUX are doing this in kind of the ways that they can without thinking about a full reorg. But it's really, really interesting to hear what the challenges have been with this and also how it's working and how it's meshing with something called holacracy, something that definitely I've been Googling. It's kind of like OUXing of teams, really, really interesting, where you've got a many-to-many relationship between roles and people. So we get into that. We touch on OOUX and AI and how that's happening at Content Square. So it's just a really juicy conversation. Very excited to share it with you. Before we get in, one quick announcement. If you were listening to this in very real time, like today, we have got an event. And if it's not today, then just skip over me and get into the interview. I'll try to make this quick. Today at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have got a OUX for AI and AI for OUX meetup. We will put the link in the show notes. Likely we will also maybe have a link there to get the recording if you are listening to this a little bit later. So this is I have been in the AI rabbit hole for about 2 months now, and I am sharing all of my learnings, the frameworks that are starting to emerge on how we can leverage OUX to help us design better AI agents, all right? To help us design for generative AI, and also the flip side. How can AI help us in our OUX work? So we're looking at artificial intelligence actually as a medium, a new kind of paint, if you will, and how we can use OUX to create new amazing things, and also how we can use AI as a tool to do better OUX. So it's definitely a two-way street. We're going to be tackling it from both angles. So if you're listening to this now, if you're listening to this on the morning, I guess, we'll have to make sure to get this podcast out earlier in the day. Maybe we'll try to get it out like the Wednesday night or something. If you are listening to this in real time, make sure to check out the link and see if you want to attend that meetup. It's going to be really, really interesting. And then also check out the links for the recording as well. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. Welcome to the Object-Oriented UX podcast, a podcast about tackling complexity head-on, gracefully organizing massive amounts of information, and designing scalable, future-proof, and of course, naturally intuitive object-oriented user experiences. An OUXer is a powerful blend of information architect, business analyst, facilitator, and UX strategist. If this sounds like you or what you aspire to, you are so in the right place. I'm Sophia Prater, UX designer, chief evangelist of Object-Oriented UX, and your host. Let's jump into it. What's up, OUXer? Today we have Ghyslain Olier, who is head of product design at Content Square and there for almost 6 years, now on a sabbatical, ready to go on a new adventure. And previously, before being in product at Content Square, Ghyslain was a principal UXer at a small agency in Paris. In Paris, correct?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So,
Hello, everybody.
Hi. So you have over 10 years in this world, and also in like the very meta world at Content Square, basically creating products for people within this industry. So, and I guess in other industries as well. So I'm really excited to dig into how OUX played out at Content Square. But I kind of want to start at the beginning. So you actually, at the beginning of like kind of our relationship, we were talking on and off throughout the years. And then you actually brought OUX training to your team at Content Square. And I just kind of want to start with that decision, like what were you hoping for? What were you hoping OUX would help with at Content Square? And what made you decide to bring OUX in?
Yes. So thank you. Before that, thank you everybody, and thank you, Sophia, for inviting me today. So in fact, I have a bit more than 10. It's more than close to 15 years in product design, and in fact, I say that because I started even before Content Square. If you remember, I contacted you in 2017. It was even before Orca, if I remember well. And it was when I was in my first agency, and I was just reading the first article you explained, kind of the foundation of the OUX, and I kind of fell in love with the concept. And I was thinking about doing a workshop about that in a conference in Paris, and this is where everything started. And in fact, this led to inside Content Square. When I was there with my team, I was still using the framework myself and wanting to kind of make sure that everybody else was able to do the same thing to prepare for the scale, because Content Square was in a hyper growth phase. And I was thinking that having people able to do that was a good thing to scale the way we were doing design inside Content Square in my team.
Wonderful. So scaling how you were doing design overall, you thought OUX was going to be able to help with that, to actually help scale. So that you were all kind of like using the same process and kind of speaking the same language?
Exactly. And making sure that people can talk the same language, to communicate the decision between them. So, and I think information architecture, globally speaking, is very important when you are scaling a team. This is the what makes everything work together. And I think that OUX and Orca give words and a framework that is very pragmatic to do that, which is what I like in this methodology.
So I love that you said that, like how important information architecture is, because I think when a lot of people think about scaling and moving fast and having to grow, they're unfortunately not thinking about information architecture. A lot of it is like the kind of move. Maybe we've moved beyond move fast and break things, but it does feel like slowing. Like I've described OUX and the Orca methodology as slowing down so that you can go faster in the long run to avoid that rework. And that's really tough for people sometimes, this idea of like, and I do it too. Like, when you're rushing to leave the house, right? And you're running around and then you end up spilling your coffee all over you because you're rushing, and then you end up spending more time getting out of the house. I think we're all guilty of it's like human nature when we kind of get panicky about getting things done fast. We rush, then we make mistakes, then we have to rework things. So did you have what was it like getting the Orca process and getting it working in Content Square? Did you get any pushback? Was anybody like, we don't have time for all of this thinking through of the information architecture. We just have to scale and get things done fast?
That's a good question. And in fact, not really, because I had the chance. In fact, I used the Orca process, or the OUX mindset, let's say, myself to better understand the Content Square world, understand the objects, understand how it works. And people were kind of impressed by how quickly I was getting stuff at the beginning, understanding stuff at the beginning. So it was kind of a way to legitimate the fact that it's a good thing to think that way. And once you have the basics of the objects that are done, I think it's easier to go fast to expand on that. So since we had this first basis done at the beginning, it was easier to expand on the foundation later on.
I love that. I love that story. And this is actually how I got started too, is it was this tool for understanding, like just understanding what the hell am I dealing with here? And it's this really quick way to kind of get up to speed in a complex environment. And then you start asking really good questions, right? You start asking
Yeah,
questions that like
exactly.
nobody else is thinking about, and you get to be that person where people are like, "Whoa, like how did you come up with that question? Like you've been here for 2 weeks. How did you understand that?" So I get that story a lot of like being kind of diving into something complicated. So actually, let's take a step back for those of for the people that are listening that don't know much about Content Square, don't know what Content Square is all about. It's kind of in the name, but can you like maybe in an OOUXy way explain Content Square? Like what are the main objects within Content Square, and maybe even what are some things that people do to some of those objects, just so we can get kind of like
Yeah. So Content Square is building a product to measure the experience of people in the digital world, basically. So basically, we help organizations improve the UX and the performance of their website and their mobile app as well, by giving them insight about how the website or the mobile app is used. And we do that by collecting clicks, scroll, mouse movement, this kind of stuff. So, and then we aggregate that into different things or objects, we can say in this case, to show some data visualization and help you understand what is going on so that you can improve the UX of your website or your app. So the kind of object we have in Content Square, it's a page, for example, a zone within a page, or a segment of people doing the same stuff. Yep. A journey is also an object in Content Square. And we have also, in fact, we have quite a lot. We have about 30-ish objects in our board. You have everything around errors, when you get an error.
What about a session? Is a session an object?
Yeah, session as an object. In fact, a page view, which is a kind of a subpart inside a session, is also an object.
Okay.
And we have everything around the performance, the loading speed. Loading is an object as well.
Wow. It's so funny because some of these objects are like, because it's so meta what you're doing, like the idea of page being an object, like that's kind of like, if you take a step back, that's like the antithesis of OOUX. Like in any other thing other than something like Content Square, I'd be like, page is not an object. But totally exactly. For Content Square, page is an object. And something like, what did you say? Journey is an object, you know, like objectifying a series of actions, actually. So I'm sure that was fun in this kind of like, and I love meta inception things. So
yeah,
like right now, I recently posted on LinkedIn about my diving into artificial intelligence, like my artificial intelligence journey, if you will, rabbit hole, and I'm using OOUX to help me understand artificial intelligence, I heard that, so that I can OOUX an OOUX bot to help people with OOUX, which is making me realize I need to OOUX my content. Like it is just, it's like OOUXing the OOUX app that I want to sometime create. It's, yes, very, very meta.
Yeah, I was listening to your last episode just this afternoon to
oh my goodness, on AI.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe coming back to Content Square, I think there is a metaphor I'm using to describe also. It's the metaphor of the lab. Like a laboratory, like a medical lab, or if you prefer, we can say a lab. You know the NCIS TV show, this old series.
I can imagine. Yes.
With the US Navy crimes, and there is the Gibbs, the boss, and Abby, the scientific expert, who is also crazy gothic girl.
I don't know, but I'm sure somebody listening knows what you're talking about.
So the way I picture it in my head, the Content Square. So you are in a lab. You are analyzing different crime evidence you found on a crime scene, like a gun, a broken phone, a shirt, stuff like that. And each of these elements, you use them into an instrument, like a scale, a microscope, a spectrometer, or whatever. And in fact, Content Square have these different modules to analyze objects. And the object, in the case of Content Square, it's a page, a zone, a segment, an error, what I described just before. and you take your page object and you put it under the microscope and look at it with the lens of the microscope. And then you can move your page toward another instrument, for example, the scale or the spectrometer, and you weight the page and you look at the page from different angle. Mm-hmm. And this is, by doing that, you have a better understanding of the overall behavior of people on that page, which is what lets you analyze finally the UX of people on your website.
That helps so much. Metaphor helps so much. Is this just what you use internally, this metaphor, or has it kind of made its way into the user experience at all?
I would say it's still internal. Maybe one day, but for now it's internal.
I wish more companies would do this. Like the one that I remember working with, let's say a large investment company. I'll just say, I don't know what matters. It was Ameritrade. So I was working with Ameritrade, which basically helps people do investments. It's a big bank basically that specializes in investments, like a Fidelity or something like that. And finance can be so abstract. Whenever you have these scenarios that are really abstract, having metaphor to kind of bring it back to something that we can understand is so helpful. And something with a bank that actually my husband and I talk about all the time is this metaphor of sock drawers, of like putting money in little sock drawers or like piggy banks because you're saving for a specific thing. And this is something that like banks are not using the metaphor of basically like how we kind of thought about, or how simple humans when it comes to finance think about like my money. It's like I'm putting money in like these little piles, and somehow that's like I don't know any interface. If anybody knows an interface that does that, or a bank that does that and lets you kind of like not create a new account that's going to have fees and stuff. It's just like, I want to squirrel money away here. Like maybe like take $5 a month for this and have this metaphor.
I know a bank, it's a neobank, it's N26, I think they are doing that, but there are other like Revolut, but it's more in Europe. Maybe you don't have that in the US.
I don't know.
But they have this notion of a kind of sub-account to put money aside.
Yeah. Anyway. And it doesn't like, it's a kind of, I have a very a place in my heart, a very dear place in my heart for skeuomorphism. And I think skeuomorphism just got a really bad reputation because it was like sort of like silly how it got implemented in the beginning. With like the radio dials that looked like the wood grain of the radio, and it was all very silly. But there is something about metaphor. It's like in a bank, like I don't necessarily need it to look like a sock drawer, or look like a piggy bank or something like that. But this like feeling and this like objectified feeling of here's a place, or here's like a little like a section where I can put money in. It feels really nice in my brain to be able to like think about things like that. We actually just looked at there is this language learning app that I'm using called LingoPie. Allie and I just did a video for our new YouTube channel. OOUX, we did it again. Shout out to the new YouTube channel. But we were looking at LingoPie, and it has audiobooks. It has audiobooks, podcasts, web series, shows. You can get Netflix shows and get the subtitles in both languages. Like, it's really, really cool. And for the most part, they did a horrible job of making everything look the same. But they did a really cool thing with the audiobook where it looks like a book, and they just did a tiny shadow along the side to make it look like it has a book spine. It's just like, okay. I'm sure they use CSS for it. It's very subtle, but immediately you're like, oh, that's an audiobook versus a podcast or a show. So like those little things like that to like tweak it to like help you be like, what is this thing here?
It makes it more tangible in a way. It's like something that you like to grab and to touch in this case, I guess. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with Content Square, you're dealing with such abstract entities that it's almost like an abstraction of an abstraction. Like a journey is already kind of an abstract thing, or a page click. So yeah, the more metaphor you can bring in, the better. So bringing us back to like some of the things that we wanted to talk about with Content Square, tell me a little bit more about objects in your module library and kind of how that worked at Content Square and like what it means, like what it actually means for a designer to take care of an object. How did that work?
Yeah, so in fact, we have this notion of module library, which are kind of local design systems, in fact. So the way we organize in Content Square, it's the product team. Each product team is in charge of part of the overall platform. And by part, I mean either a big feature, a module, or an outcome, like is onboarding, or a mix of both. But globally speaking, for a given designer, they are in charge of a module and an outcome to reach with this module. And so each designer have also a list of key objects they are maintaining on top of the module.
Okay.
For example, if you are in charge of the alerting module, you are also in charge of the alert object and the notification object, which is another one. And this organization is also reflected into Figma, into our the way we design stuff with the design system. So each designer have a bunch of disposable project file, but they have a long-lasting file, which is called the module library, which is again kind of a local design system. And inside this module library, this Figma file, you have what we call the key screens of the modules and the objects. And here you have the small version of the alert object, the medium, the large, and etc. So the card, the full page, the table version. And the cool thing is that each module library is in fact a proper Figma library, meaning that if I need to use an object from a colleague of mine, I can connect to his or her library and instantiate the object for my design. For example, if I need the page object, which is a nested object inside alerts, then I can just connect to the other library and instantiate the small version of the page object inside my design. So the benefit is that you get the update. If the page object changes, you get the update. The downside is that you need to be extra rigorous when making the update, and everybody needs to have this system thinking, thus the OOUX training or UX training. But yeah, this is the way we want it to work.
So what I'm hearing is, correct me if I'm wrong, is that object-oriented UX, that thinking has permeated into how you organize your team, the responsibilities of your team, as well as the design system.
Yes, I think that OUX is very compliant with the design system thinking. In the end, an object, it's a mental construct, but in the end, it's a bunch of pixels that appears on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's packaging, yeah.
Yeah, so you need at some point to have something that is represented somewhere. And for me, an object should be in the design system somehow. And this is the way we have implemented it. So just for the disclaimer, we are not ready yet everywhere, and it's a bit aspirational what I've just described, but we have it implemented in different parts of the platform, and it works. And so just coming back to your question about what does it mean for a designer to take care of an object, it means that if I'm in charge of the alert object, for example, I'm in charge of the inventory of the version, so the small, the medium, the large version of this object, or the card version, the page version, how it looks like in reality everywhere, because we know that we are not there yet, and we still have shapeshifters, and we still have mask objects that persist, but at least we know they are there, and we list them. Few guidelines about how to use the object, which is kind of the object guide, simplified, let's say. And ideally, everything around how to select, create, update, and delete this object. So kind of the code flow
Yeah.
that should appear inside this module library. So again, we are not done for all the create, update, delete of all the objects in all the module library, but this is where we are going.
So this is a dream. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I have been telling teams, I'm like, organize your teams around objects. Like it's a really nice way to kind of to slice responsibility. Now, how does this change how you collaborate? Like, do you like, and I'm actually really curious about relationships between objects, especially when that's on different module teams. So I'm thinking like, for example, an alert might be about a page, or alert could be about a user segment or something like that. I don't know, anything that the alert could be about. Or like, how does a session and a user segment relate to each other? So I have this like idea that where the team collaboration or where the collaboration would happen is literally where objects nest within each other. How does that work how do object relationships and collaboration reflect each other or not?
Yeah. So you're right. This is when you are nesting object that you need to have collaboration between teams. I wouldn't say that we have cracked the problem yet. It's not perfect. It's a lot of unstructured collaboration around that. But the idea is that if you own the alert object, you own the alert object up to the point where you have a nested object. So if, for example, you need to have the page object small version inside your alert, you are not going to move what is inside the page object. You take it as it is, and if it's not, you are not happy with that, you need to ask the other team to work with this. The problem with that is you are kind of creating some dependencies between teams, and this is where it's not cracked completely yet. But I would say that we have this on top of the module, which is already kind of segmented in the portfolio. So it helps because obviously you have a lot of instances of the alert objects inside the alerting module. So it helps, let's say, centralize the objects, but still the idea and where you get the benefits, it's when you have an alert that is outside your own module. This is where the system is happening. So,
yeah, I mean, I think you say you haven't cracked it, but like, I think that is, I mean, collaboration is always going to be a challenge, right? Like getting people together, but this at least gives you a little bit of a roadmap of like, I know exactly who I need to talk to about this because I know that they are responsible for this object that my object is interacting with. So I can go and talk to them, or having just making clear what those dependencies are. So it's almost like the team structure is a reflection of the actual information architecture, which is often not the case. We structure our teams I've seen teams structured by pages is one, which drives me crazy. I've seen them structured by device. So, the mobile team, the desktop team. And how about that, actually? Do y'all have Content Square on different devices? And do you also try to reduce shapeshifting across those devices? How does device come in?
Yeah, no, Content Square is a desktop app.
Okay.
It's a web app designed for desktop. We are analyzing mobile apps. Right. But the actual tool is not a mobile app.
Okay. If there were a mobile app, I would hope that you would not have a separate team for your mobile. I'm gonna trust that Content Square wouldn't do that.
Yes,
but I do see that. I do see that a lot where there's the mobile team and there's the desktop team, and then you get like I'm using Kajabi for another course that I'm taking. So it's like a course platform. And it's so funny to see the functionality on the phone versus on desktop. It's like I can, like just simple things. Like there's actually some things that are available on the phone, but not available on the desktop. It's completely arbitrary. Like I can star a lesson, but I can only do that from the app. So if I'm on the desktop, I can't star a lesson. I can't see what my starred lessons are. So like basically, which is like bookmarking, basically. So it's like the mobile team decided that bookmarking a lesson was a good thing, was a good action that could be taken on that object. And they didn't tell the desktop team, or I don't know, like, did they not even have that conversation? which then leaves me like looking for it on desktop, because I'm like, well, I know I've starred a. It's like, because as us as end users, when we're end users, we don't actually recall where we did the thing. We're just like, I'm just like, I'm in Kajabi right now. I know I've started an episode before, I've started a lesson before, and now I'm looking for it on desktop, and I'm thinking I'm just wearing crazy pants because I like can't find it anywhere. So
Yeah.
yes, dividing teams in all sorts of really strange ways. I think that dividing team by object is just the way to go. So congratulations.
Thank you. Not easy anyway, but it's
Never is.
organizing a portfolio. It's not easy.
So you also mentioned that you have like a OUX advocate role.
Yes.
What is that person? I mean, I can guess what that person does, but tell me more about that.
First, it's not a person; it's a role.
Okay.
And maybe this is something. I don't know if you heard about holacracy. Have you heard about that?
Tell me, what is this?
So basically, since I discovered OUX, I can't help but using this to think about design stuff. And holacracy, for me, it's the identical twin for management and organization of people.
Oh.
So since I discovered holacracy, I can't help but using this to think about management and how to organize people and teams. So basically, it's a management system that aims to distribute decision-making inside an organization. And it's designed to be more flexible than the way to run traditional organization, let's say. And it's very role-based. This means that you have different roles in your team. Mm-hmm. And as a person, you can take one or several roles, and a role can be taken by one or several persons. And it's so it's a way to organize. And in fact, OUX advocate is a role, and depending on when you can have just one person or several persons taking that role. And this role have a purpose. And so, what's the purpose exactly? It's I have it written down somewhere. Yeah, objects manipulated in the product are crystal clear. The ORCA process is known by everybody who needs it, and the OUX fundamentals are spread within the product teams. So this is the purpose of why this role exists.
Beautiful. So this holacracy. So just for anybody that's wanting to look it up, it's HOLACRACY. Holacracy. I'm going to be looking that up. And so it sounds like the person to role is a many-to-many relationship.
Yes.
So you might and then one of the many roles that you might have is this OUX advocate role. And exactly. And then you have very clear responsibilities, which you just
exactly. When you have a role, you have different domains, which is what you own. So people cannot change your domain without asking you. Mm-hmm. You have the role, and you have a purpose, and you have what we call accountabilities, which is what other people can expect you to do when you have this role. But it's very OUX. I think it could help you think about that as well.
Yes. I'm definitely going to be looking that up. I mean, it does sound, just this idea of this many-to-many relationship makes so much more sense instead of like, no, you are this one role and you have this one role within our organization versus like kind of like a more modular version. And is it something that you can kind of, like, is it more flexible? Like I kind of can move in and out of roles, and like I might have this role just for 6 to 8 months and then be like, ooh, like I'm going to take on this new role and pass this role off to somebody else?
Yes, you have the full flexibility, and this is the idea. And this is also in this idea of scaling in Content Square, just to we were in the hyper growth phase, meaning that when I joined Content Square, we were 3 in the product design team. And at the beginning of the year, we were 30-ish in my team. Mm-hmm. So from the beginning, we needed to have some ways to scale everything. OUX was one way to scale the design and information architecture. Holacracy one way to scale the organization and how we organize the team, so that you can have more and more roles. You can create roles, you can destroy roles, you can change the role along the way. It's pretty efficient, in my opinion. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Very, very, very cool. That's I think you might be the first person I've talked to that is as actually, I've talked to people who say they use OOUX to understand the organization. Not only understand the product that they're working on, but like, let me OOUX the current state of our organization so I understand where I fit into it. But to actually use OOUX and along with this holacracy idea to organize your team is just, I'm just really excited about that. So I want to talk to you also about something that I get questions about this a lot, and I've recognized that OOUX really helps with this, and this is mergers and acquisitions. So when you have new products coming in, you're trying to integrate new products. This is something that you mentioned that like OOUX might have just helped out with a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about how OOUX can help you understand a new product, like a new product that you might be designing or that you are bringing in to your company?
Yeah. So for me, it boils down to this notion of understanding quickly. So during my time in Content Square, we had 6 acquisitions, and every time we needed to kind of integrate the products into the main one, most of the time. And OUX helped me understand the new product and raise risks about and opportunities about integration by comparing, for example, similar concepts, same name, different concept, or similar concept but different names. So raise this flag early in the process to make sure that, for example, you have a dashboard on one side and a workspace on the other side, but this is not the same kind of. Or you have a segment on one side and a segment on the other side, but it's not exactly the same definition. So you need to make sure that when you have both of them in the same UI, user can understand what is the difference. So this kind of stuff. So it's mostly about raising flags and trying to resolve conflicts as early as possible for me.
Did you actually? Yes. And that's, I mean, I've heard of people doing, actually building an object map for the new thing coming in, or even a competitor, actually, just to compare and be like, this is what we're doing. This is what they're doing, so that we can see it. Because I have this idea that your O's, your R's, your C's, and your A's is your competitive advantage. Like there's branding, there's UI design, there's really amazing writing, there's marketing. But really what you're offering to an end user is your O's, your R's, your C's, and your A's. Like, what are the actual concepts? How do they connect? What do you get to do to those things? And what is the structure of those things? So it really is like kind of like that's your competitive edge. Like if you have the exact same O's, R's, and C's and A's as another company, like that might be something to be worried about, right? That you're like,
I would say yes and no, because it's also, so I agree that some of them are the competitive advantage, but some other are at industry level, I would say, and some kind of patterns that you expect to have some relationships that works like that. I think it applies to some UIs that are more and more standardized, but I think we can even think about this concept at object level. I don't have an example here, but it feels to me that it's at the same time your competitive advantage, but also you should not, for example, have a notification that is completely something else that what you are used to have in other apps, you know?
Exactly. Yes. I 100% agree. I mean, I've even thought about like consistency across objects. I mean, even if you're not in the same industry, like I use the example of an event object. Like, can we just agree that if there's an event, like we're going to put the date and time in the lower left-hand corner? Like, let's just all put it there so that everybody knows that that's, or like my other examples, like if you have a person, just put people in circles, put their faces in circles all the time. Let's just disagree. So there's that. There's also this like, yes, you might have the same objects as your competitor if you're in the same industry, and maybe even the same, like the relationships. It's like who can match the user's mental model the best. Like the more, if you're connecting these two things where your competitor is not connecting these two things, that can give you a competitive advantage. If you have a CTA on this thing, like let's say you can duplicate a segment, but your competitor, you can't duplicate segments or something like that.
Mhm.
You've just added another you've added another CTA to an object.
Yeah.
And yes, and of course we want the UI to be really usable, and we want good performance. Like performance is another big thing, right? So is it performant? Is it secure? All that amazing stuff too. But yeah, like if you did have the exact same O's, R's, and C's and A's.
I agree that in this case you should be worried because if it's absolutely exactly the same, you are just average. You're the middleman.
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, it's a tough one. I could actually even argue it both ways. Like, one, you could say, well, if you've got two companies in the same industry, theoretically, they should end up with the same O's, R's, and C's and A's. If they're solving the same problem, they probably will come up, and they're kind of like, they have the same, but it's
Yeah,
like,
but at the same time, they have different approach. For example, you don't use let's use, I don't know, Slack versus email. It's communication.
Yeah.
You send messages, but it's not the same kind of messages. It's not the same time frame. So you can have this message object that is in fact different from an email to a Slack.
Yeah. So another one, actually, I think another French company, Be Real, the social network Be Real.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Be Real?
Yeah, I know them.
You know that they're a
thing. Kind of.
Yeah, so like all social media is basically the same objects, right? It's people, it's posts, it's comments, right? And then but then it's like the rules change, and that's what makes it industry. It's like almost like the objects are the same, but like what are your attributes, which can kind of correlate to the rules.
Yes.
Like the rules around a post in Be Real is that you get a certain time frame to post, and you only get one a day. So like even the cardinality is different. Like how many posts can a person post in one day? You know, it's basically infinite in Instagram, but like in Be Real, you get one a day unless you post within the 2 minutes, and then you get 2 extras. So like it's the same objects. It's just the rules and how you and even like the attributes that you see on those objects.
And maybe in this case, it's a signal of the maturity of the field because, for example, social network, you have a lot of them, and I would consider it pretty mature. So you have kind of a consolidation, and the best practices have emerged, and you have the objects that are there like that, like you describe, where another field can be more fluid and less well defined.
Yeah.
And here you still have the differences we are talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's take like segment. So segment, you have a segment as an object. I have been through, I mean, this is completely different, but we have segments in an Active Campaign. I use Active Campaign now. We're moving to ConvertKit. I've used Mail. So like just for like CRM/email marketing, I've used MailChimp. I've used HubSpot. They all have segments, but what I can do to the segment is different, and like how I can use a segment and how a segment attaches to a campaign, which in my head is like very much a clear mental model, and some of them connect them better than others, and it's easier to add people dynamically to a segment. So like what a segment is changes in those.
But the segment specific example is a tricky one because we can talk about that for 3 hours, but
yeah.
But it's not as simple as it seems because, for example, do you consider a segment of a cohort of people having done the same thing, or just something?
No, I don't.
Or just so you can consider that different ways, and I remember some discussion we had at Content Square about that, and it's not obvious, in fact, when you think about it.
Yeah, so segments, and recognizing that I think is really important to be like, oh, we're using this word in our context, it means this thing, but like somebody else might be using a similar. They might be
cohort,
using this word cohort,
yeah.
Right? Or they might use another tool where segment is used, and segment means something completely different. And this is like people are bringing their mental models over. They're bringing their language over. And how do we mitigate that? Like, I'm using a tool now called Searchy to host all my videos and also do all my transcriptions and do a little bit of AI fun stuff. Well, I think the last thing we need to talk about is AI. We'll get to that. But like, I want to give this example. So in Searchy, you get a number of hours. You get space. Okay. So like I have 500 hours of space within Searchy.
Mm-hmm.
And in all other applications, I have space in, like Gmail, like Apple Photo, my iCloud, right? Like we all get the messages, you're running out of space in your iCloud account. What do you do when you're running out of space? You go and you delete stuff, right? Or you unhook stuff, okay, to free up space. Searchy, I just found out, works differently. When you delete stuff, if I delete 20 hours of videos from my Searchy account, I don't get those hours back because the cost is in the transcription, which they don't tell you at all. And I was messaging them about this. I was like, wait,
it's burn.
I just deleted all these hours. Like, wait, I didn't get my hours back. And they were like, oh, no, it doesn't work like that for us. It's just however many, it's because of the transcription. That's what costs us money. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. And that works different than everything else on the internet where you have space.
So you will never get them back. It's kind of money, in fact. 1 hour, it's $10, $20, $100. I don't know.
It's the metaphor. The metaphor is wrong. Yeah. The metaphor of space, and then me putting stuff into my space, and it's you have like the little bar, and the bar fills up, and I just figure, oh, I'll take some videos out, and my bar will go back down, and it doesn't work like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such like an OOUX parable of like me taking a mental model that I've been taught about how digital space works, and Searchy not being like self-aware enough to really realize like, oh, this is how people are going to bring their baggage mental models into our system and could potentially get confused. And like, I'm messaging this person, they were like, yeah, it's a real problem. We get this all the time where people are mad about it. And then you lose trust. And like, we could say, maybe that was a dark pattern. Maybe they didn't want to tell us that, but
on
like,
purpose.
I don't think that would be Searchy. They're a pretty great company overall. I love them. But yeah, like that's like my trust plummeted with them. Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. What's up, OUXers? There is something very important that I have neglected to do in the first 50 episodes of this podcast. And that is to implore you, dear listener, for a review. So here I am, asking ever so nicely for you to drop a rating and review of the OUX podcast into either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This can really help us spread the OUX love. So if you've gotten any value from OUX and the Orca process, which I'm assuming you have since you're here, I'd be so appreciative for a few minutes of your time. Okay, so how to do this? Don't actually go click on the rating metadata because that would be way too intuitive. On Apple Podcasts, go to the podcast detail page, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see some big stars down there that you can add stars. And then underneath that, there is another little link that says create a review. So that would be amazing. And on Spotify, you've got to do this on the mobile. On Spotify mobile, go to the 3-dot menu on that detail page and hit rate. And actually on Spotify, even on an episode detail, you can leave a comment there too. If you scroll down the episode detail, there'll be something that says something like, how did you like this episode? And feel free to put your thoughts there. Thank you so much and happy OUXing. So, okay, before we wrap up, tell me your thoughts on OOUX and AI. I know you kind of wanted to chat about this and like, has it come into Content Square at all? And where are you seeing the parallels?
Yes, so in fact, it was before you made the whole 1 hour talking about your AI and OUX. So I think you covered quite a lot in your talk, which is very cool, by the way. No, but what I wanted to say is the same distinction as you make in your other episode. It's for me, you have OUX for AI and AI for OUX, which are two different sides of the coin, and totally different things. For me, about the first thing I would say is that OUX is very compliant with AI, or at least the the conversational interaction, like a ChatGPT, for example. For me, it makes total sense when I ask a question like, what is the problem on my website? I would expect the bot to answer about stuff and to bring me some objects, like one instance of the most problematic error on my website, which is an object, the error object, or one instance of the segment object having the worst conversion rate, or 3 instances of replays to illustrate this kind of stuff. So for me, since objects are some atomic stuff, it's something that is really really small and very contained in something. It's easier to bring it in a chat, like you can so basically bringing this object inside the chat is very compliant with the AI. So that's for one thing.
Okay, so wait a second. Let me back up a little bit to really pull this together. So when you're thinking about how you're seeing AI helping you, like with ChatGPT, you're wanting it to pull back instances of specific objects?
Yeah. So I'm asking a question. What is the problem? What are the problems of my website? Which is a typical question that people have in their head when they are using Content Square.
Okay.
What they expect, I think, is to understand what is going on. And to understand what is going on, the main anchor of understanding are the objects. So here is the most important errors you should look at. Here are 3 examples of sessions you should look. Here is a loading object, and this is the segment object. And when you are bringing these these object instances into the chat, it's also a good way to trigger a navigation, because now you have something to click on to continue your navigation outside the conversation with the chatbot. And I really believe into the mix between chat-based interaction and typical WIMP, so widget icon menu pointing style. And I think this the blend can happen when you are pulling objects inside the chat.
So okay, let me. That's really really interesting. So when you're pulling objects, and so when the actual chatbot will deliver you back objects too.
Yes, exactly.
So,
either you can use. So that's not something that I was thinking about, of you putting object as a prompt, but maybe this is something you can use to kind of decorate your prompt or enhance your prompt. But I was more thinking about the chatbot answering you with objects. Look at this and this and that, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. That gives me a lot to chew on. So I'm trying to think of like with
like attachments, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about like let's say it was my website, like OOUX.com, and if I could have like a content squarey AI that I could chat with and be like, show me my most popular resource, like which resource has gotten the most clicks, it would actually just, and it would look like the resource on my website, which would be really cool. Yes. So it'll be like, okay, the podcast episode with Ghyslain, like that was the most popular one. Or I could say which of all, like look at all of my testimonials and tell me which testimonial somebody from the from a
testimonials from Europe about specifically the discovery round, for example, of ORCA.
Yes.
You have just people from Europe about discovery round. And for me, it connects with the notion of design system. A design system, for me, it's a collection. One part of a design system is a collection of objects, and these objects, when you are putting them into the design system, they are floating around. They are not inside a page.
Right.
So you can pull them from anywhere, from a search. You can pull the object and give it as a search result. Or if you are interacting with the chatbot can pull them for you and bring them to you.
Yes.
And this is also in the same idea of the main navigation is the fire escape. which is something I really agree with you about that.
Shout out to
This is
Val
the thing.
Jinx. Val Jinx said that. That was
Oh, yeah.
my friend Val Jinx. Yeah, she said that. Gosh, oh my God, like 2015 or something. And I was like, yes, the main navigation is the fire escape. But yes, being able to like really think about your and this is also where I think some personalization will come in too, where we might all have the same objects, but like, will we have different instances that are being shown to us? Right. So there's like personalization at scale. People are thinking that the UI is going to adapt, and maybe there will be a little bit of the UI adapting. But I'm thinking even more so like my system of objects might adapt to me, because like for me, you know, campaign, like let's say like OUX.com could adapt. So it knows something about who's coming, and it's like going to surface which testimonials should this person see, which testimonials are going to resonate, because we know that this person is a content strategist. So we're going to be bringing testimonials from the content strategy perspective. What event is going to really resonate? What resources are going to resonate? Oh, here's some OUX strategists that we think you know, like because we know how they're connected to you on LinkedIn or something like that. So you go to the page and it shows strategists that are already in your network that you could reach out to.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that gives me a lot to think about. We didn't even get to another one thing we wanted to talk about was your personal knowledge management system. So maybe that's another time. That is something that also is very near and dear to my heart, like OUXing your own brain and your second mind. So maybe next time for that one. But thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say about OUX before we wrap up?
No, I think we are pretty complete, let's say.
Actually, I do have one last question for you.
Okay.
Yes. One last question. So if anybody here is listening who's thinking they're in your position, they're in more of a director position, they're in a leadership position in their company, and they're like, this sounds awesome. I want to I'm thinking about bringing OUX to my team. What would you say to that person? What would you like, if they're maybe having a few reservations that maybe you had in the beginning of like, ooh, am I going to like, are we going to do this training? Are we not going to do this training? What kind of thoughts would you have for that person that would be where you were a couple of years ago?
I would say the good thing with your content, and thank you for that, is that it's gradual, let's say. I think you have the small version, the medium version, the large version. I would start with the Udemy course.
The fundamentals
course, the fundamentals course. It's 20 hours, something like that. So
the fundamentals course is 5 hours.
5 hours, okay.
The master class is the 20-hour one.
Yeah. So, but you can start small and see, and for sure you will have benefits just with the small version, but then you can scale to the next one and to the next one. What we did in my team is we had everybody look at the Udemy course, and we had the OUX advocate do the masterclass.
Yeah.
And so we had this good balance between people that were just knowing the concept and able to talk about it, and some real advocates that were really pushing the boundaries to have everybody use it properly. So I would say that go small, but start, and you for sure will get some value.
Yes, like get everybody to take the quick course and then see who's like really nerding out on it and get those people in the master class to become those advocates. I think that's great advice. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for all of the insights you provided. It's a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Cheers. Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit objectorientux.com/podcast for show notes. Our soundtrack is Fighter by Ruby Bell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Happy OUXing!